I do want to cover one more topic, and I'm going to handle this as quickly as I can, and I'll do it more or less on my own. Maybe Diana can get in on this a little bit, and that is the reporting of races for purposes of analysis. We want to be aware that races that are reported at the end of the season are not necessarily the races that we would use to calculate the season winner or the divisional winner. The races that we use have some very refined or confined restrictions. We all know that we're based on weather and that some days are better than others. And when you submit your races at the end of the year and you get that whopping $5 credit, you want to make sure that the races that we submit as handicappers and as scorers are usable to Perf Lake Ontario. Fact of the matter is that a lot of races that we sail are not suited. When you submit your race results, we want to exclude things that are outside of parameters of weather. We want to make sure that the course selection is proper. The divisional splits are as required by Perf. The racing format is what Perf is looking for, and that we take some individual exceptions off the race results. The first thing I want to talk about is wind speed, which should be between 5 and 20 knots. I have a rule as a PRO which has kind of gotten traction around the lake, and I use my rule of 23, which will be the total wind velocity and wave height, and that usually is a pretty good upper limit. So that would change that 20 knots. We want to exclude a boat where the wind dies and the boats are drifting over the finish line. We also want to exclude races, even though the wind velocity is within these parameters, where boats are plowing into waves that have been left over from an afternoon blow. The second part of this would be the course selection. We're going to try for equal number of legs, though we have discovered or discussed that a 5-leg race is probably okay. And I'm going to let maybe Brian or one of you guys dispute me here. I think we have established that because I run 5-leg races all the time. If the 5-leg race is scattered throughout the season and is roughly of equal length, we believe that to be okay and can be included. Shortened races should be excluded, except if it's done simply for time, meaning we're running out of daylight or something. Probably should not be included if the wind dies halfway through the race and we're just trying to drop a finish line in front of the boats. Another point would be the divisional splits. Boats should be in entirely different divisions if they're flying a spinnaker or not flying a spinnaker. Sport boat and heavy displacement boats should not be sailed together. They should be separated out. Again, for Perf purposes, I understand that if you got 3 boats on the race course, you're going to sail them together, but that is not a Perf race. Boats of similar types, but with a Perf number greater than 40, 30 is better, should not be grouped together in a division. And then we need 3 boats in a division in order for it to be counted. If there are 2 boats in a division, we don't use that race. We also have an exclusion for special format races, catch-up races, single-handed races, short crew, skipper swaps, and long-distance races. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to get into the long-distance numbers. They should be excluded, though but I do want to discuss that a little bit. And then if we do have a one design fleet sailing within the Perf fleet, but sailing as a one design group, we want to have them to be started within 12 minutes of another Perf fleet so that there can be a comparison made. Um, we also have the instance where there are individual boats, and Diana and I discussed this, and until just recently, I really hadn't thought about this, but if a boat that's on the race course has an obvious problem, has a spinnaker wrap or an equipment failure, that boat should be excluded if possible. If a boat goes back to retrieve a hat or goes off the race course for a while or goes just isn't sailing, that boat should probably be excluded. Boats that are scored TLE, which has become quite popular among sailing now, which is time limit expired, which is as much for the race committee as anything, so we can get home and score the thing. If there's a time assigned, that should be left out. It's best to use the notes. I keep a race notebook for every race, and it's probably best that race notebook be kept with these notations and submitted to the scorer so he can look at all of these different things. All I'm getting at is that when you submit your race results at the end of the season, that if we can omit some of these things, it will make it far easier for Diana to analyze and take a look at. We also want to make sure, and I'm guilty of this, I don't always include the wind velocity in my reports, in my submitted races. And that it's fairly easy. If you're using Sailwave, it's fairly easy to do all of these things. Wind velocity is part of the race setup. I have included in the spreadsheet or the sheet that you enter information with Sailwave. It's very easy. They actually allow you to put a custom column in there, and I just essentially have a check mark, 1 or 2 or whatever, so that I know what races I want to include as far as perf is concerned. So all I'm saying is that the scorer, you as the handicapper, make the PRO and the scorer aware of these things and what should be submitted. I know a lot of times the scorer is the one that submits the race results, not the handicapper, but depending on how the organization works, I think these things are important. And as I said, Diane and I discussed this at length earlier and felt that it was a pretty good idea to include that in this seminar. Diana, do you want to add anything to what I've just said? Correct me or add and put additions onto this?
No, I think actually you've covered it pretty much. The big thing that I need to emphasize, if you're a handicapper and you're the one doing the scoring and you're submitting the race results to me, you're going to help me immensely. All I see is numbers. I don't see what happens on the course. I don't see the wind. If you can give me an idea of the wind, the analysis program is actually quite nice. It highlights time on distance, calculated time on distance that are way out, and it makes me focus on that. But the end result is I have to make that final decision on whether to include that race in an analysis or not. And a lot of times I'm on the fence because if I don't have wind information to verify that, yeah, this is a funky race, I got to look at all the racers and go, you know, was there that common thing where a lot of these racers, because I mean, I do know what happens on the course, and I know that sometimes wind just dies halfway, so half of the races are left behind and the others are doing fine. But it's all a judgment for me. So if you can help me in any way and identify, or if a certain person, like Bill was saying, has an issue on the course, take that result out ahead of time so that I don't even see it, and you're going to make my life a lot easier. I guess that's pretty much it.
Okay, very good. I want to reemphasize that these numbers that are submitted, these results are the basis of what we do, and if they can be made as accurate at the source as possible, then everything works better. Owen, anything?
Yeah, I'm just going to throw in a real quick one. When you're setting up your race fleet, the best thing to do is try and group like boats together and keep their ASP spread as tight as possible. So I know that isn't possible all the time, but the best race results we get, and some of the best racing, is, in my basin at least, a white-sailed fleet where you've got people rating 180 to 210. We've got a lot of super competitive boats. That's a 30-second per mile spread. Works out spectacularly. And my friends at the National Yacht Club, they actually have a fleet that is comprised just of sport boats. If we could dream our club members' fleets perfectly, those are the kind of things to look for. I unfortunately sail in a fleet against a bunch of much larger displacement boats that rate from 111 all the way out to 196. I have to watch out that I don't end up behind one of these guys and have them steal my wind. They always wonder why I'm going off into the corners of the race course. But that's because I'm in what you could almost call a mixed fleet with a sport boat and traditional racer cruisers. So if you can try and think of how you compose your groups when you're doing your club racing, the racing results will be fantastic for us. That means equal number of up and downwind legs. Just tell us if it's a windward, leeward, or a triangle. Helps us out. Record those wind results. In my basin, we record them at the beginning, first leg, midways, and at the end. Take an average so that we know what happened that night. The more data is the better. So please help us out with that. Makes our job a lot easier.
And I want to add to one other point on that, and it goes the other way, is that grouping the cruisers together, the guys that have the grills on their transom and Biminis and Dodgers and things like that. Now, I don't know how the numbers skew when you run these through the race analysis, but that is the great untapped area for racers are the cruisers. And if you can get out there and race them all together so that they have their own start and they don't have to worry about all the hot shots out there or the sport boats or anything else, group them together as a division. And that has worked quite well for the clubs that I have worked with.